Hey guys, how you doing? Yeah, sorry the sound was kind of off, or I had to readjust it for a little bit. But I'm here. I'm sorry I started a little later than usual. I had a few things to take care of earlier this morning. And actually, today's stream will probably end up being a little bit shorter than my usual ones. Because I have to do a couple things later on today. But I figured for a day, I'll probably do fan art. I only have time to do like one character day. But I figured what I will do is actually I'll do one that some of you might recognize from the Disney films, Louis the Alligator from Princess and the Frog. So I'll actually be drawing him for today. So in fact, hang on for a moment. Let me just kind of readjust my camera for a moment. I know I don't like to readjust my camera mid-stream, but in fact, I have to do it in this case. There we go. So I think as usual, I'm kind of starting with my very light sketch. And of course, for those that know Lucy Alligator from the movie, he plays trumpet. So I'm gonna give him a nice little small trumpet ready to play. Have room for his cheeks. Have room like for his legs. For his little tail. And right now you can see I'm just being very light, just kind of laying everything out. Yeah, I'm glad for everyone who's able to drop in so far. So right now I'm just kind of honing on his face for a little bit. In fact, let me make sure I can bring his snout out a little bit more. I have a little section for his little cheeks. I have a section for his eyes, his little eyebrows. Make his little hump, because alligators, they kind of have a little hump. They do kind of have a hump like going down their little backs. He's got his little arms. He does have very short, kind of stubbly arms. And he's got his legs. I think I'll worry about the legs if I lay. Right now is when I kind of make sure I get this part here, because at least getting his likeness, but also getting his trumpet. That's the important part, because that's such a big part of his character, is that he always like to say he likes to play trumpet, and he wants to play in a band, or as he likes to say, he'll play with the big boys. Let me get his little eyes and kind of bring those out. Let me get this little eyebrows. Let me get his little cheeks. Let me kind of bring those out just a bit more. In fact, let me bring his arms down a bit more too while we're at it. Let me try. I have to bring his. I have to bring his arm down a bit more here. Bring his trumpet out a bit more here so you guys can see it a little better. Hey Isaac, last year you guys have another favorite side chick. Gay's definitely one of my favorite too. Yeah, he was just a lot of fun. And honestly, when it comes to that movie, like whenever they gave the characters, he's probably the first one I think of. Yes, I do a fan of Lily from Masculine Magic Ballerina. My watch show reaction was stunning. Oh, nice, nice. Have you had a chance to post it yet? I don't think I've seen it yet. If you haven't posted it, please definitely do. I'd love to see it. I'm trying to remember who voices Lewis. Michael Leon Woolley. That's it. I know he had been a couple other like Disney related stuff too, but I forgot which stuff exactly. But I think a lot of stuff he was involved in as far as Disney goes, more stuff he kind of got into. You know, I think after Princess and Frog. I think Blue's probably one of his first like major ones he's did with Disney. You know, I've heard he has like done some other stuff. You know, does well with voice acting gigs and character acting stuff like even before then. Let me get this on. Okay, that's a lot better. Let me get his little knuckles. Let me get the bottom part of the little trumpet. I almost look like a cornet in a way too. Now that I'm looking at it. Those don't know what a cornet is. Basically, a cornet's a kind of similar thing as a trumpet, except it's a little bit shorter. And from what I've heard, you get a slightly richer sound from a cornet compared to, like, say, a regular trumpet. Yeah, I have very fond memories of getting it just to see this in theaters back when it was new. Because while I wouldn't put Prince of Frog as one of my top favorite Disney films, you know, like that role goes with Aladdin. It's definitely one I'm really glad I was able to see, especially since it was the first time I'd seen, you know, a major like film like in theaters. In fact, I remember my dad and I we went to go see it. They go see it at a small theater out in Noonan. So it's a very small town. I was about 30, 40 minutes from where I live now, and they had a small movie theater, and the tickets, wouldn't you believe it, just to kind of get how long it was, they were like $12, and this was for an evening showing too. You know, fast forward to now, that if you gotta go to a movie showing now, like at best, if you go a matinee will probably maybe be $15, depending on where you go. At least down here it will be. Let me get the back of his hump here. Where's guys get his little scales? And in fact, I saw a lot of pretty good movies. I wish I could remember the name of the theater right now, because I saw a lot of pretty good movies at, you know, that little small theater on Noonan. Because I saw Princess and the Frog. I saw How to Train Your Dragon. That was a fun one. And I think that one made me surprised too, because I remember hearing it was good, but I didn't think it was going to be that good. I saw that. I saw a few others, big stuff names too. Some stuff I thought that was okay. You know, Avatar. You know, I saw that. I enjoyed it time, even though looking back, I think it is just okay. I saw that. I think I saw a few other like 3D movies too. Of course, this was also around the time when we know those 3D movies they were still pretty big in theaters. So it seemed like every movie that was out, it was trying to utilize like 3D. And you know, How to Train Your, and you know, things like Avatar and How to Train Your Dragon, those are movies that really knew how to utilize it well. Let me get his little stubby feet here. Let me get his toes. Because the problem is like with some 3D movie releases, like the problem is like one, they don't really utilize the 3D that often, or you know, like it just makes everything appear darker. Let me get the back of his tail here. And this is probably my first time in a long time since I've drawn Lewis. I know I drew him once years ago where I drew him in human style because I thought about that song on When I'm Human. He actually initially wanted to be human, but of course he's accepting, like him being alligator and investing who he is. But I thought drawing after also universe type of deal where he didn't become a human, so I drew like a version of that. Like one of these, I'll probably post it on here in the near future so you guys will be able to see it. I remember back when this in Ophia Theater. Before that, we were watching Jim Carrey, Chris Carey in the last 30 minutes scared the crap, so we watched this. Oh yeah, I heard that Chris Carey movie here. It's pretty intense. But I've heard like that particular like interpretation is probably the closest to the original source material. And it's a weird thing about it is that like I've always heard just mixed opinion. Like some people say it's really good. Some it's a masterpiece. Other people say it's kind of a mixed bag. From the little bits I've seen so far, because I never had a chance to see the whole thing just yet. But from what I've seen, it looks like it's pretty faithful. It's definitely, I do definitely agree, it's a more of a darker, more intense, and scary version compared to what we associate with Christmas Carol. Now it's been a couple months. Yeah, that's true. Because I think around that time, especially with Avatar, you did start having more like IMAX theaters. Because it's something like Avatar, whether you like the movie or not, like it's definitely a movie that need to be seen in 3D and on the big screen. So that gave you a chance to kind of check to see like everything. But also because I always think about how with IMAX for a long time, you had to go kind of like certain places or certain certain like events or certain places if you want to see like an IMAX movie. Now if you're lucky to have a theater that actually holds it, you can go see whatever you like. Alright, so let me go ahead and actually kind of refine our sketch here. I think another one I saw, I think the only movie I recall I saw in 3D that I was a little disappointed by was probably Clash of Titans the remake. I get this. Now, granted, I'm biased because I've seen the original. Seen the original from the '80s. I think it's still pretty good. Of course, it's got that claymation from Larry Harryhausen. I think I mispronounced his name. Not only not only the movie itself was kind of underwhelming, remake compared to the original. The 3D itself really didn't kind of really impact it all that much. I think at best just made everything kind of murky and dark. But then again, when it comes to doing 3D movies out there, of course you can't do any worse than say, like Jaws 4, the infamous Jaws movie from back in the 80s, where basically their money shot of a huge scare was having that shark come towards the screen and slowly, then you just hear the slap, and hardly anything happens. Yeah, so let me kind of refine the sketch a bit too, because I do want to kind of add do a little more with these details before I start going in with the pen just yet. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think that looks pretty good. So, let me see. Do I want to start with black or blue? I'll start with the black. Just for the occasion, I did kind of put on some slow kind of New Orleans theme type jazz in the background, just to kind of suit the occasion. And as for New Orleans, I'd say I've visited New Orleans I think 2 times in my life. I know I visited once for a family, my dad's second wife's side. They had family down in New Orleans, so we had got to go down there. And another time I went is when I was doing a college trip well, really, I was in high school at the time, but we were touring other colleges to kind of like guess, kind of see what they were. And we actually, what was funny is we actually went there doing Mardi Gras. And one thing I will say is, like, it's a good thing when we went, because I think we went, when Mardi Gras season was kind of winding down. And so a lot I can't really mention on here, since I do want to kind of keep this stream somewhat family friendly. But they're not kidding when they say it does get pretty wild in New Orleans on Mardi Gras time. I did get some beads though. I did get some beads. For Bruce, the Charlotte Faker, and 40. Like I have a UTP. Hey, Double, glad you were able to drop in. It's good to see you. Look at Faker and 4, like I have a YouTube poop. That's true, because it's like, you know, it's like, it was like that clay mouse, like, just coming towards you slow motion. Like, it's not growling, it's not doing anything. Like, that was scary. In fact, I think the most recently, I think I saw parts of the movie on its review I saw called Double Toasted, where they actually roasted the movie. And really, just the whole movie was just a whole combination of just really like questionable, just bad ideas that ended up becoming like one thing altogether. Oh yeah, it was. It really was fun. Let me get the values back here. Let me see something for a brief moment. But yeah, New Orleans, it was great. Now, granted, I'm trying to remember. I think when I did on New Orleans the first time, that was before Katrina. I think, and the one I did, I think like a good couple of years like afterwards. Yeah, I wouldn't mind going again. I especially wouldn't mind going back when they have the New Orleans Jazz Fest because I really dig a lot of like New Orleans. I really dig a lot of like their fun. A lot of their fun stuff because a good number of like jazz funk artists that I love came out of oh yeah, I love Bad Double Toasted. Yeah, they're always a lot of fun. Yeah, because I've kept up with them since back when they used to have their own they used to have a website called Spill. Well, sometimes because they even have a website called Spill.com, you know, and that one they had a slightly different format where they would actually do more like small like little animated reviews. But I think what happens after a while, I can't remember all the details. I think another company had bought them out. At least they bought the site they were using. So then as a result, they really didn't do anything with them for a while until they rebrand themselves, you know, as Double Toasted. And what I didn't find out until recently, until that apparently they didn't run long in that. Apparently back in like the late '90s and early, they used to have a public access show called The Real Deal, and they stationed out of Austin, you know, because that's where they're from, you know, like Austin, Texas. And they would do stuff back then too. Yeah, because both like, I think it's two guys. It was Martin Thomas and Corey Coleman. And Corey Coleman, he's a pretty interesting guy because, you know, on top of, you know, like, you know, being like a movie reviewer, you know, like he actually is. Yes, I don't know if he still is it now. He used to be an effects animator. In fact, one of the things kind of was a badge of honor is that he was effects animator where he did the shadows for Space Jam. And what's funny is that and what's funny with him is that like as much as, you know, Space Jam have a huge cult classic nowadays, he'll probably want to tell you is that it's not that good of a movie. And while I have to disagree with that, I generally think Space Jam is kind of a guilty pleasure, at least for me, because I grew up, you know, like watching it. I definitely can see, you know, kind of the flaws, you know, like with it. And I haven't even seen, you know, like the second one yet, because from what I've heard, basically kind of doubles down on a lot of the things, you know, the first one did. And even then, like, even though there are some issues with it, there are things about Space Jam I really do like. Of course, I think the animation is great. The animation is good. The voice cast for all Looney Tunes is fantastic. And also the soundtrack's good too. I generally think that the soundtrack is probably the big reason the movie did as well as it did. Because, you know, like, it had so many big names that were popular at the time, Of course, like Monica, R. Kelly, pre-cancellation, Seal, I think Coolio had a track on there. Yeah, just so many like different artists that were really big at the time. I forgot who did the first one. Come on, get up, it's time to slam jam. That's still my favorite. Like if you turn that on, anytime I put that on, I still get pumped to this day. Yeah, I remember we used to have the little VHS, and I remember just kind of looking back now how with a lot of these old VHS you see trailers, different movies. I think I remember, and if some things I remember just from coming across like reposts online on YouTube how they would show trailers from I think Batman was Sub-Zero. I haven't seen that movie yet, but I heard that's pretty good. They had trailer for Cats Don't Dance. It's another underrated movie though. Yeah, it's definitely an underrated movie from the 90s. That's another underrated one. Let me get some eyebrows. Yeah, it's been years I've seen it. I think the last time I saw the movie in full, I think when they aired it on Cartoon Network about a few years back. And I will admit, looking at it, nowadays, in later years, like I can say some things don't really hold up as much, but I still consider it guilty pleasure because I think its biggest flaw, I do agree, is that it is pretty much a commercial. But to be fair, like Looney Tunes being used, like for product placement and that kind of advertising, that's really nothing new because they've been used to promote like Kool-Aid, different snacks. It's really nothing new. But I guess the thing about with comic, how some critics got irritated about it because it's on a much larger scale. Let me see. This Thursday, I watched number 1 and 2. The first one was Percy chanting. The animated the voice and the mutters are high pitched. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen the Cinderella movies, because especially the first one. I've seen the first one. I've seen the second one. Third one I really do like. In fact, funny enough, the third one is kind of such a bizarre anomaly when it comes to Disney sequel, because it's probably one of the few like Disney where some people, I've heard some people say they like it more, than the first one, and it's actually one of the few like Disney sequels that's considered to be really good, in general. Heard the second one a lot of things where just also flex how many big tunes and moves they own. Yep, from the little bits I've seen, that is pretty much what it is. Pretty much Warner Brothers kind of flexing, what the properties they got along to stuff they got through HBO Max. And so that kind of probably irritated a lot of people because it's basically amplifying, like what was already happening the first one, because first one was basically kind of flexing, Looney Tunes, but also flexing Michael Jordan, which, he was kind of a big star at the time. And, now they got this up. They pretty much kind of did the same thing, except, with LeBron James. And a little bit that I've seen, LeBron James does a pretty good job. But, New England to flip out in age well, one for effects and one for if you know, you know. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. And Noonan, because I think Wayne, played by Wayne Knight, who, I actually was surprised, to find out actually voice acted in the new Daft Looney Tunes movie, The Day the Earth Blew Up. I think he played the mayor in that movie, and I was surprised because because initially when I watched the movie, I honestly didn't recognize his voice. Or am I thinking of somebody else? Am I? No, I'm thinking of the right guy. No, I'm thinking of the right guy. But I know in the Looney Tunes movie, Day for Bluff, I honestly didn't recognize him at first because, of course, like he played the character a lot more low key than he normally does in voice acting. And I want to say he has done like voice acting in other movies aside from like Cyberspace. I know he did it in one other one for Scooby-Doo. I'm just trying to think whether things he did that involved with Looney Tunes though, because I was surprised they didn't put him in Looney Tunes properties, aside, for Space, especially considering what a big hit, that was. Yeah, okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now, I believe we can start going in with the color. just to go ahead and kind of get every. I'll just use regular green here. Even though it's more of a brownish green, I'm still gonna use this green as a kind of a base. Yeah, and also I heard with the new space, I heard it's longer. It's longer too. Eric Bowles is comedian. Everybody got a lot of his old voice after his ease. Oh yeah, Eric Bowles is a real child. He's almost kind of a Renaissance man anyway because he's a great voice actor. He's a great artist. He's a great artist. One guy on the list is he's like a brown or yellow mix of green. He has like a brownish green color. Because I don't really have any brown on him, I'm gonna do a little bit of color mixing here. Probably gonna put down this green, probably lay down a little bit red to get that brownish green color. So right now I'm just kind of laying this down, as a base. But Eric Bowser, he does a really good job. I think with I think out of character he does it. I think he does Daffy the best. I think with Daffy, he really captures the Daffy side of him, the crazier side, because you got two eras of sides of Daffy. You got the scheme. You got the scheming, like egotistical Daffy, but you also got the wacky, crazy one too. And I think he really gets that type of Daffy down really good. He gets him fantastic. Because there's a good job of him. He even does a great Porky too. Because I think he does that. He does Porky. I know he's on Bugs. There's a few others too. Others too. I can't think off the top of my head. I know for the newer Space Jam. I'm trying to think who did he voice voice in the new one yet? Because I know in Space Jam they did bring like some older voice actors the old one, because I know let me look at the cast real quick. Okay, I think I'm looking at the cast right. Apparently he did a lot of additional voices, because I know in the voice cast that they got. Oh, never mind. He did Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Foghorn Leghorn, Elmer Fudd, and Marvin the Martian. Okay, so he did do a couple of them. Because I know for Bugs Bunny they got Jeff Bergman back to do Bugs. So he did Bugs, Sylvester, Yosemite, Oh, really? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the cast that says he did Yogi Bear and Flintstones. Okay, I didn't know they were in it. But even Jeff Bergman, he does it. Videos with just Eric Hawkins up for an hour. Yeah, pretty much. Because my recollection, the movie has a pretty somewhat smaller cast. And that's kind of one thing I do kind of admire is that it's not like the movie doesn't have like a big cast, but it's a very talented cast too. Because you got him, you got Candy Milo, Fred Tatasciore, Wayne Knight. There's a few other newer guys on the scene too, but I can't remember their names at the moment. But it's got a really good size, cast. And that's gotta be hard to do for a long period of time where you're pretty much just kind of talking to yourself for an hour, especially you in different characters too. In fact, speaking of that movie, I actually went and ordered the DVD. I just got it actually a few days ago. In fact, I even got it right here. Since I don't have HBO Max, and since I wanted to own like a hard copy, I figured I'd actually get the actual DVD. Because there are certain things where, like, for me, like, if I really do like something, like, I don't want to see it on streaming. I'd rather just kind of have a hard copy. Plus, how Warner Bros. Has been, with Looney Tunes as of lately. Like, you just never know. Even though I've heard, the movie's actually been doing really well on, like, it. I think doing well, because I think it's on HBO Max. Her's been doing really well over there. Which I'm really glad to hear that, like, the movie's actually been doing really well. Like, even though it kind of underperformed the box office, which I don't know, like, even though technically, like financially, it didn't it didn't do well. It did a lot better than people probably would have expected that movie to go for. Especially considering that really didn't have had little to no promotion, and pretty much it was kind of all word of mouth. And I do get that apparently, like since it was kind of really being, even though it was made by Warner, it's being distributed through like a smaller studio. I think his name was Catch Up, and since they're kind of smaller, so they can't spend as much as as much on promotion. On promotion, I think with a little more marketing, it probably would have got more marketing. Like more folks would have known about it, and it probably would have done a lot better too. Yeah, so I'm just gonna use a little bit of brown here to kind of actually murky up this green a bit. I am gonna add a little bit of yellow too, because that's a good thing about using red and green together. You get a nice brown since they're complementary colors. Yeah, that movie, Look, that's probably the first movie in a very long time. I think I've mentioned the other streets before where I actually had to go see it twice in theaters. I agree on copies. Angels on White coming happy and release. Also take a conversation, a stunning more in the chat before. One is gonna care about 2D or 3D. Yeah, they really don't seem to do that. From what I've heard, there are there are some plans they actually try to get released. I think it has gotten bought out by another company. Now I don't know all the details just yet, and some of them I can't really remember at the moment. But I heard there is talk of actually getting it released for once now, especially like seeing how well Data blew up on perform at least on streaming now. Like some of the streamers down the road is like, oh, okay, there's actually a market for it now. Let's see if we can buy it up and put it out there for people to see. Which I don't see why they didn't do it already, because from what I've heard, when it was in test screens, it did well. People liked it. And sure, I understand that like movies can get canceled all the time in pre-production, but I could understand it, if it was a movie that never got finished or if it was in the drafting process. But from what I've heard, the movie was pretty much over, most part done. It was finished. So at the very least, I think if you want to, at least I feel if you put it out there, you want to put it out there and have it do enough so where you can at least get something for it versus just shelving it and having all that effort go to waste. So yeah, I definitely agree. They don't really seem to care. In fact, that's kind of the reason why I wanted to get the DVD, because you just never know, especially with streaming. Because that's the thing with streaming is like, it's cool you have that convenience, but at the same time, like you just can't help but think that all it takes, either for the power to go out, you can't watch it, or if they decide or starts to get taken off, it starts to get taken off the platform, like for whatever reason. Like you just never, like sometimes you just never really know when it comes to streaming services. I'm gonna add a little more red and yellow to this later on. I'm just kind of darkening everything up here, so it can be a lot, just to kind of add a little more of that contrast. But I've heard, like there is plans to kind of get that release of yellow, and if it does, I don't know if they'll get a theatrically release or if they'll take it straight to streaming. But either way, I'll definitely kind of rush out to see it. But also, I've been seeing, maybe because I've been seeing kind of a growing reignited interest in 2D, because of course maybe because I've been seeing a lot of like indie animators online, on Instagram, on YouTube, where they're doing a lot more traditionally animated stuff, which I'm liking that I'm starting to see. Cause at least one, it shows at least there's still an audience for it, but also of course after a while like maybe in the near future we'll probably get more indies too. They'll probably give Disney some competition. Disney and Warner some competition. They'll actually start making good quality content of their own. And of course I'm aware going indie, that's a lot hard. That's easier said than done. But I feel like once you got get more studios that kind of step up to the occasion and actually make new films, then we'll start seeing more better like quality stuff. Yeah, I'm just going to give a very light shade of green here. I see. Some mirrors are out of print. But yeah, that's true. Yeah, some of them are out of print, so those are really hard to see. Labor sketching here looks kind of like reptile scales. Yeah, thank you. I honestly didn't realize that the sketching it kind of does give more of like a scaly like look to it. It actually wasn't my intention, but I'm glad. But I'm glad it's at least turning out that way. And that's the thing, and you're right, with some movies, it's really hard to kind of find some movies because they are like out of print. So if so nowadays, if it's an out of print, like you gotta be either find like a DVD that still exists, find a if it's been released on VHS or maybe on VHS, and good luck finding one, like if it's actually fun, if it's actually at a reasonable price. Let me get his little stubby legs. I'm just gonna add a little bit of shading here around his little stubby legs here. And with some stuff that I print, because you never know, like sometimes either things get lost, some gets lost, like it gets dropped from a streaming platform and you just don't really see more, or if you want to go way back, a lot of like old like silent films from back in the day, a lot of those are actually lost because one thing about film, if it's not stored properly, it will deteriorate after a long time. So that's why if you'll hear about at least some people, some collectors when they store like film like really open, they kind of store in these like warehouses that are actually really cool and that aren't too humid but they're not too hot, because you want to make sure the conditions are right so it won't deteriorate. Because then also what sometimes will happen, you have this thing called vinegar syndrome, where as it starts deteriorating, it starts creating a really foul vinegar smell where it can really kind of really harmful for you to breathe in if you're not careful. I'm gonna have his whole tail in shadow here. I think I'll go ahead and do that. Yeah, but when it comes to streams, you just gotta be careful. Because I checked what was the other thing I was getting ready to mention? I think it was another thing I was getting ready to mention too. I think it was oh yeah, I think it was back of Space Jam from the voice cast. I think like I mentioned, Eric Bauza, Jeff Bergman. That's what it was. So I think that I know that I was really cool to see him get brought back to do Bugs one more time in that one. Because I think aside from Eric Bauza, Jeff Bergman, I think he was probably the best voice actor like post Mel Blanc to do Bugs Bunny. Cause I think like for some reason with Bergman, especially back in back early day when we first did, he really not only nails the voice, but he nails his mannerisms. In fact, I probably mentioned it on the stream here on the stream before, but there's that whole classic story how when he first auditioned for the role, he had brought two two cassette tapes. He had one with his voice and with Mel Blanc's voice, and he played them back to back without the back for the auditioners and not telling them which was which. But the thing is, they couldn't figure out which was which, so he ended up getting hired right then and there. Yeah, I think when it comes to bugs, like Bergman does the best job, voice blank. But Eric Bowles is right behind him. And the only reason I'm saying that because I think he does a much better Daffy Duck. I think he nails like Daffy Duck to his Daffy side. I'm just gonna add a little bit of more red here, just kind of before I start the yellow. I convert my cassette as MP3 format. We'll use my white cassette clipper. Oh, cool! And see, that's something I haven't used in a long time. Cassettes, because my parents, they used to have cassettes, but I know a lot of them we've either kind of misplaced or got rid of. Plus, we normally have a cassette player now. That's cool. You still have them though, because that's true. Because there's even a lot of because now there's movies out there's even a lot of like music and CDs that are still out of print, and sometimes they don't even get repack and service until like years later. Like one thing off the top of my head is in my uncle's vinyl collection, he has a whole bunch of old vinyl records, and one in particular that I really like that I was surprised I couldn't really find for a long time. It was Buddy Miles. Those who don't know Buddy Miles, he was a drummer back in the day. He used to play for a band called Electric Flag. But he also played with Jimi Hendrix. He even played with his own group, the Electric Flag. He was a really great and funky drummer. But he had his own live album called Buddy Miles Live, and it's got this killer, like psychedelic like artwork. It's beautiful artwork, and even the performances themselves sound really good. Sound quality is really good, but apparently, like, it was out, but it never got re-released, and it was out of print for years up until like 2 years ago when it finally got released on CD. Of course, now you can find it, but still, like, there's plenty of others you probably won't be able to really find anywhere unless you probably go to your local record store, or if you're lucky to find it online through Amazon. Of course, that's depending you find one that's at a good price. Let me just kind of go over, just kind of get a little more of that red. So I am going to add a little bit of yellow pretty soon, but I just want to layer up really good before I get to that point. But that's cool. The white cassette player. I'm gonna have to check something like that out, because I honestly didn't know that was a thing, to be honest. Because I know the clothes that I have right now, I do have a special type, like a so kind of like CD converter type deal. Because on my computer, since it doesn't have a CD drive, but since I like to collect up CDs from the record stores I go to, one thing I'll do is that if I want to burn it to my computer, basically I'll put in like this little CD converter, actually put it in there, and actually burn some MP3 files from there, so that way it's on a computer. If I want to put on one of my MP3s that I have, I can do it that way. Because sometimes you want to have like some good physical copies on hand. In fact, that reminds me, one of the things I need to do is that because I still need to go through the rest of my CDs that I have there and start putting more in the other CD case out, because I do. So what I do for a lot of my CDs, I kind of put them in like little black CD cases, so they're all kind of like put together, but also so they're not taking up as much space. So that's what I normally do for those. But I still have a whole bunch more I haven't really gone through just yet. Because there's some that I've bought from the record stores I've been to, but also I got a bunch of old ones like from my dad that he had. Because since he knows I like to listen to a lot of music, he let me have some of them, because he's actually going to move have his old place pretty soon. And asked if I wanted some. And I said, sure, of course. Now, of course, I know ones that I don't keep. Like some I just kind of gave them. A lot of them I just kind of gave away, like the Goodwill. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. So now, here comes the fun part. Now I'm just gonna kind of start really making them come to life a little bit of that yellow. And so now it should bring everything to that nice, like brownish kind of like swamp color. And that's why I wanted to use red mixing it at first, because I know mixing it that red, it'll kind of give like this brownish like swampy color. Since I'm aware he's not like a bright green. In fact, I might need to add a little more red and green to this later on, because I know it's still a little too bright. Yeah, and I know for a while, what I would do back when I used to download music from iTunes, one that I always found myself doing a lot was if I would have to kind of like, for any music that I want to play on my MP3 player, sometimes I have to reconvert the file from that I downloaded from iTunes to create an MP3 file, because sometimes for whatever reason, like if I download it from iTunes, like sometimes it could play on my iPod just fine, but if an MP3 player, it wouldn't really play it, so I had to reconvert it. Now I'm aware, I think later versions, like you could do it, but I think early on you couldn't. And interestingly enough, at least from my experience, when I looked up on my Gold computer, the CD music files, they wouldn't take them as much space as if I would download it, through iTunes, which I can understand, because if you're downloading from iTunes, you're also downloading, like album artwork, like other information going for it as well. Whereas doing for the CD, the only thing that's on there is just just the title track, and that's pretty much it. And maybe the composer. That's especially if you're using like Windows Media or not, or a different type of program on that variety. Sorry, I sound kind of nerdy for a moment, but it's just something that comes to mind whenever I think about that. And we got a little shine into his little trumpet here, but right now I think I'll just go and use it here. Well, since I got it. Yeah, in fact, let me see. Yeah, I'm just gonna go over this here. Go just a little more red to kind of brown this up just a bit more. And one of the things, I appreciate all you that have been enjoying the stream so far. I know it's still later usually. In fact, that's some of the things I'm considering that I may consider doing in the near future. I'm thinking like if I'm just streaming on Saturdays, I'm thinking maybe I'll probably move it to maybe like a later day instead of doing it at 10:30 like I've always been doing. Maybe I'll move it to around this time like now, like 11:30 or 12. Since I know a lot of you guys are usually on here around that time. I don't know. I'll probably do a poll later on to see, just kind of find out and see what works. Now let me just kind of go over just a little more of that green. Yeah, so we got Lewis. He's really kind of come to life now. I think Michael Cooley, he did a great job voicing him, Lewis. In fact, even that movie, like that whole movie, like Prince Art, they had a really good voice cast. Cause of course, some of course, like Anika Rose, as Tiana, Keith David as Dr. Fauchelier. Who I honestly kind of think his character was probably a little underutilized. I think he could have had a little bit more screen time. Because he pretty much steals the show just almost every scene, that he's in. Jim Collins, of course, Peter Bart, Jennifer Lewis, Oprah Winfrey, I forgot she was in it, Terrence Howard, John Goodman, Jim Cummings, the Firefly. And honestly, that's the first time in a while, like, Jim Cummings is one of my top favorite voices. That's the first time in a while I had ever seen him in a lead role on Disney. Because he's voiced in like Disney movies before, but I think to me I recollect it's very rare where the character he voices is actually one of the main characters. Because usually he's voicing a lot of side characters, but this is one of the few times he actually kind of voices one of the main characters in the movie. And he kind of voiced, that Cajun firefighter. When really, kind of listen to the voice, he's kind of basically doing the voice he does for Fuzzy Lumpkins and Powerpuff Girls, except he's going heavier on the Cajun voice. Such a compliment so far. Hey, thanks. I'm glad you like it. Appreciate it. Yeah, 'cause it's gonna be almost done pretty soon. I was gonna try to do a second one, but I'm aware I'm not gonna really have much time to really do a second one. So that's why I want to make sure I try to get this one out the way. Get this one out of the way and try to do one really good before I have to go, because I will have to go in for work actually in a little bit later on. So I really do appreciate you guys that did manage to kind of show up, kind of despite the circumstance. But I would like to see, Disney do at least one more traditionally animated movie. Like I still have to check out the that Once Upon a Time, like 100th anniversary, I'm sure, because I've seen parts and parts of those look amazing. Because not like the craft has died out, there are people out there that still like it. There are still people that still practice it. In fact, I actually came across a video not too long ago where it's a group of like 3 animators where they got their own like old school like ink and paint department where you literally have to actually go and get actual paint and paint them on actual like transparent cells. Like they actually have a whole kind of company where you can actually like do that. And they're like one of the few like only companies left that still makes like traditionally like painted cells. I'm just gonna go over this blue again. Yeah, you can see I'm just kind of slowly layering everything up, just layering everything up. Yeah, because I'd like to see Disney do at least one more digitally animated film. Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised. I almost so scared to even speak in existence. But with Disney doing all these like live action sequels now, what if it gets to the point where instead of actually making originals, they start making animated like remakes of their live action movies, like an animated version of Parent Trap or an animated version of Airbud. It's like, I don't know if that was Disney or not. I'm just kind of rambling. Yeah, they definitely should. They definitely should. Because I like to see them make more and more. Yeah, I mean, traditionally animated films, definitely. Because I like to see them go do animated films, and also kind of try to change up for it. I wouldn't mind seeing like something like Don Bluth do another animated film. 'Cause I know he's still trying to work on that Dragon's Lair movie. Like I don't know if it's. I think it's still in production at the moment. And I definitely would like to see him. Like to see him kind of get his make that one because I definitely want to see like animation looks like him actually get a chance to do like make one more film. Like even if the movie ends up not being that good, I definitely just want to see him try to do at least one more time. You know, best case scenario ends up doing good to where other people start knowing, especially Disney, because you know like that's kind of what happened the first go around. When he went solo and started making his own films, because of course, you know he did Secret and Nim, that ended being a moderate hit, even though they almost pretty much went bankrupt because it became a moderate hit. Then they did American Tail. That was a big hit for them. They had Land Before Time, which was also another big hit. And those ended up outperforming Disney to the point where they pretty much had to kind of step their game up. Because, of course, you know, once you got the 80s rolled around, you know, like, since now you have these other studios actually start stepping up and doing their own movies, they realize, like, oh, we actually got a little more competition now. Like, we got to step up and prove why we have the reputation that we do. Yeah. Yeah, but call me a hopeless optimist, but I do think it'll probably come back one of these days. Because, I mean, as long as there's people out there that want it and do want to see it, yeah, I think there'll still be a place, and there'll still be a place for it. Now, granted, maybe right now, like it'll be a while before we start seeing on the big screen, on the major X silver screens. But at least for right now, with a lot of like these indie prod, indie product extreme and streaming, at least we're starting to see a little bit of interest like elsewhere. Now, in fact, let me go and actually kind of shade his trumpet. I realized this whole time I hadn't really did any shading on his trumpet, so let me go ahead and do that. Yeah. Yeah, like I'm saying, even Traveler doesn't end up being great. It'd just be great to see him do it one more time because he had Secret of Nim, American Tail, which is honestly my favorite Don Bluth film. It was that, Land Before Time, then All Dogs Go to Heaven, whereas it's considered, that was considered one of the last great one. And then you had the ones in the '90s that were kind of a mixed bag, because then you had Rock-a-Doodle-Doo, you had Thumbelina, you had Troll in Central Park. A lot of people consider that to be the worst one. Oh yeah, he is. You had what? Then you had what was the other one? A Pebble and the Penguin, which I actually kind of like, even though it's not great. I kind of like that movie. Pebble Penguin. Then you had Anastasia, which it was a big hit in the '90s. Even though like some people say some people say like it's kind of them copying Disney, but then again, who better to copy Disney than a guy who used to work for Disney? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your comment. Like, is there going to send the name of DVD Blue distributor? That I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if there is. And then I think the last major one he did was Titan AE, which I think it's been a while since I've seen that one, but that one I remember that one being surprisingly good. Yeah, essentially it was. It's been a while since I've seen that one too. It was a nice surprise, especially because it was like a dark fantasy, and it's a pretty ambitious Because I remember I caught up catching on Toon Disney like years ago, and it's surprising a really polished movie, especially considering like this was like their first like major move, kind of like major movie. Yeah, it is based on a book. In fact, I need to kind of check around the book too. And plus, it came out at a pretty good time too. Time to really interesting, because that was kind of the period where I'm like, dark fantasy was actually kind of was kind of popular time because you had films like There are films like The Labyrinth. What's another? Like The Labyrinth. Like Heavy Metal, Fire and Ice. There's a couple of other ones I'm trying to think of too. Like Ralph Bakshi's on Lord of the Rings. Like that was a period where, like dark. There was like interest like for like dark fantasy films, and Cedar kind of fell right in that, field. And I know Disney, they tried to kind of get in that field when they did Black Cauldron. Black Cauldron, which, while I think there's good things about it, it didn't really work come together fully. Because I think the thing with Black Cauldron was like there are things I think has really great elements. Because like I like the fact that it has like a darker tone. I like the fact that it's a lot more action oriented. I think it's pretty daring compared to what Disney had done in the past. Just thing is, I don't think all the pieces actually had come together. And what's interesting, it seemed like them going in a darker direction was kind of more of a was something that probably had like later in production, because the movie had been in production for like almost 10 years. And I've seen like old concept art from back then when it first started working. It seemed like early on they wanted to go for more like a family friendly kind of a light adventure, kind of similar to what you'd see maybe like Sword in the Stone type of deal. But it seems like later on, I guess once they saw what a lot of these other movies were doing, the whole dark fantasy genre, they decided they wanted to really kind of get in with that type of vibe, and they couldn't really find a way to kind of really make everything fit, cohesively. Plus, it didn't help that apparently Katzenberg had pretty much edited down almost 19 like 9 minutes of footage. Yeah, I really need to watch Secret of Nim again, because yeah, it is a really nice movie, really nice. Because I remember when they I think they did go over budget, because I think one of the images they ended up having to kind of like ended up having to sell a mortgage on his home because it was going way like over budget. Because that's the thing that people about going indies, that it's one thing to animate movies, but it's another thing to kind of finance them though. So I'm just kind of go over some of these outlines and just kind of like bring these outlines so that way they don't blend too much into the other like line work here. Whilst I've seen it, I haven't really seen, well, at least aside from a few like movie reviewers, the sequel, Secret of Them 2. For those I know, there is a sequel, and yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Yeah, I think it's probably the few at like three, the few. It's like one of like three like Don Bluth properties that got remade a sequel, because I know Land Before Time. Those know Land Before Time, most people probably know them for the sequels rather than the original, because they've had like 14 like sequels, and they had a TV show too. It's amazing. I think they've had that many, and of course you're not surprised. I think Don Bluth's not really a fan of them, especially which is not surprising seeing how he wasn't really involved in any of those properties. And then you had All Dogs Go to Heaven. Of course, that had three. That three, four. No, they had three movies. Yeah, I think the Do you know the one that Andrew has been surprised for taking a character? I think he has a Cobbler Princess. Thief and the Cobbler. That's the one directed by Richard Williams. And that one's kind of a tragic type of story, because for those who don't know, Thief and the Cobbler, like, it was directed by Richard Williams. And he was known for British, who did a lot of really like big commercials. He directed a lot of animation for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In fact, he's part of the reason that movie looks as good as it does, because like it's really fluid and full of life. But like Thief and the Cobbler was kind of like his pet project. But the thing is, he's been working on it for years. I think he's been working for like 30-something years, like only for like the studio was working with. You end up kind of buying it out for him. They kind of rushed production and kind of releasing it, at least a kind of a butchered version of it. Now, it's always anytime I look at the story, but it's always sad, but it's also kind of frustrating too because one, like it really sucks, to kind of have your work being taken from you when you haven't really perfected yet. But at the same time, it's like it's frustrating because like one thing though about Richard Williams, like he was a big time like perfectionist, and so a lot of times what happens at any time they got some money, got a bigger budget, like once he felt like something was good, he wasn't satisfied. He would keep wanting to have either redo it again until it was perfect. But it seemed like more because I always think the more time they had, more time and money that they like that finish line to get it done. It never got there. And when you're just doing just a side project, like just for your personal leisure, that's fine. But problem is when you're dealing, with like a studio and film distributors, at a certain point they want to see like a kind of finished product. But at the same time, as like I have been, with Richard Williams, I think he was less concerned about whether if it would do well or not, or whether it'd be a big hit, and more that he just wanted to really make something that he would like. And I think I've seen the Recobbler. I definitely recommend, if you haven't already, if you see Thief and the Cobbler, see the Recobbler cut. I got his book went on sale animation or interested. I've heard of that book. I need to get around to getting it one of these days. Yeah, very talented animator, Thief and the Cobbler. Alright, y'all, I believe that is it. So, guys, I hope you all enjoyed watching me draw Lewis. And also, for those of you who weren't here last week, let me kind of give you a brief rundown of some of the stuff I was able to do for last week. So last week, for those of you who were here, I actually drew one of my viewers, OC's Henry, who's a hotel magician. Henry. I did him, like that week, but also I did, Yaka Warren, I did a brief sketch of him. In the meantime, for those of you who watch me on DeviantArt, I did a color study, with the sketch I did, like Homer and Fat Tony, I did that as well. Thanks, Shay, I'm glad you like it. And so, guys, I appreciate all of you who dropped in for today's stream. I know it started a little later than usual, but guys, I hope to see you all again around the same time next week, if not a little soon, if either sooner or later. So guys, have a great day, have a great weekend, see you next time.